You know, sometimes life has a way of getting heavier little by little until one day you wake up and realize you're carrying far more than you ever planned to hold. And if we're being real, really real, some of us walked in here tired. Not the kind of tired a nap can fix, but the kind that sits deep in your soul, the kind that makes you wonder if you've missed your moment, if God forgot your address, if maybe, just maybe, this is where your story starts fading out. But I came to remind you of something heaven has never forgotten. God knows you're tired, but this is not where your story ends. If anything, this is where a new chapter is stretching, waking up, getting ready to rise inside you. Because God does some of his best work when we feel the most worn out. He shows up in the places we thought were the end and whispers, I'm not done with you. So if you walked in here weary, uncertain, or running on fumes, don't you dare count yourself out. Your strength may be low, but God's strength is just getting started. And today, we're going to step into that truth together. Your exhaustion is not evidence of God's absence. It is often in the very moments when you feel the heaviest, the most worn down, and the most stretched that God is actually doing his deepest work in you. Exhaustion has a way of making us believe we're alone, as if the weight we're carrying is proof that God stepped away when we needed him most. But spiritual tiredness doesn't mean abandonment. It means something in your life is demanding more strength than what you currently possess. And that gap between your strength and the strength required is exactly where God meets you. Exhaustion isn't the void where God disappears. It's the space where his presence becomes more necessary, more intimate, more foundational than ever before. Sometimes we misunderstand what God's presence looks like because we imagine that if he is near, everything should be easier. We expect his closeness to feel like constant clarity, overflowing energy, and perfect peace. But God's nearness isn't always comfort. Sometimes it's construction. Sometimes it's God doing the kind of internal rebuilding that demands your vulnerability. And vulnerability can feel like weakness. When you're exhausted, you're not performing. You're not polished. But God doesn't meet the performance version of you. He meets the real you, the tired you, the honest you, the version of you that can't pretend anymore. God's presence can be loud in victory, but it can be just as loud in the cracks of your soul. In the moments when you're sitting in silence trying to hold back tears because you're not even sure what direction to move in next, he is there. In the moments when you're showing up for everyone else but quietly falling apart on the inside, he is there. Exhaustion is not the proof that God walked away. It's the place where God invites you to stop relying on your own strength long enough to notice his. There are seasons when exhaustion comes not from doing the wrong things, but from doing the right things for a long time without rest. You've been faithful, you've been consistent, you've been pushing, you've been believing, and eventually even the strongest spirit gets tired. That tiredness isn't a punishment. It's not God pointing a finger at you. It's the natural weight of carrying purpose, and purpose has mass. The calling on your life is not light, requires endurance, courage, and sacrifice, and every sacrifice has a cost. When you feel that cost in your body, in your mind, in your emotions, it doesn't mean you've fallen out of alignment with God. It sometimes means you've been walking faithfully in a lane that demands divine strength for the next stretch of the journey. God has a way of using exhaustion to slow us down long enough to hear him again. When you're tired, you become more aware of what you can't do on your own. You begin to release the illusion of control. You stop running at a pace that your heart can't sustain. And when you slow down, when you pause, when you breathe, you create room for God's whispers to reach you. Exhaustion can become a holy interruption, a divine pause that protects you from operating outside of the grace that's meant to carry you. There are moments in scripture where God showed up strongest, not in the triumphs, but in the fatigue of his people. Elijah had just performed miracles, yet he ran into the wilderness tired, depleted, and ready to give up. It wasn't his exhaustion that offended God. It was his exhaustion that opened the door for God to minister to him. God met him in his weariness with food, rest, and reassurance. Elijah wasn't abandoned, he was attended to. His tiredness didn't disqualify him from divine assignment. It positioned him to be strengthened for what was next. Your exhaustion can serve the same purpose. Sometimes the reason you feel tired is because you're growing. Growth is not gentle. It stretches, pulls, challenges, and reshapes. Growth doesn't ask for convenience. It asks for capacity, and capacity increases through pressure. When you're in a season that's expanding you, the feeling of tiredness is not a sign of God's absence, but a sign that he's enlarging your life. You're carrying something bigger than what you've carried before. You're becoming someone you've never been. The tiredness you feel may be the labor pains of a new level, a new assignment, a new identity being shaped inside you. Exhaustion also forces you to confront the truths you've been ignoring. When you're strong, you can overlook certain areas of your life because you don't have to face them yet. But when you're tired, your spirit becomes honest. You start recognizing patterns, relationships, habits, and responsibilities that are draining you. Sometimes God allows exhaustion so you can see what needs to be released, what needs to be adjusted, and what needs to be surrendered. The tiredness becomes a mirror, not a verdict. It reveals, but it does not condemn. One of the greatest lies the enemy will whisper in exhaustion is that you're failing, that your weariness means you're not enough, not strong enough, not disciplined enough, not spiritual enough. But you being tired does not make you weak, it makes you human. And God's strength has always been designed to work in partnership with your humanity. The enemy attacks in exhaustion because tired people are vulnerable. But that vulnerability is exactly where God plants his reassurance. You're not failing, you're not forgotten, you're not behind. You're simply the place where your strength ends and his begins. Your exhaustion can even be a sign of spiritual transition. There are times when God is shifting you from one phase of your life to another, and the in-between place drains you. It's the place where you're not who you used to be, but you're not fully who you're becoming either. That middle space can feel exhausting because you're shedding old ways of thinking, old habits, old fears, and old versions of yourself. Transformation is tiring, but the tiredness is not abandonment. It's evidence that you're on the verge of something new. When you look back at the seasons you once thought would break you, the exhaustion you felt then will make sense. You'll see how God used that very season to mature you, clarify you, anchor you, and prepare you. You'll see how what felt like emptiness was actually God making room. What felt like silence was God tuning your ear. What felt like heaviness was God strengthening your foundation. None of that happened in his absence. It all happened in his presence, even when you didn't feel him. Your exhaustion is not the end of your story. It is the invitation into a deeper dependence, a deeper relationship, a deeper awareness of God's sustaining power. It's the moment where you stop trying to carry everything alone and allow God to carry you. Even in fatigue, purpose is still in motion. There is a misconception many people carry that purpose only moves when we feel strong, inspired, or fully energized. We imagine purpose as something that waits for our motivation to catch up, as though destiny pauses every time we grow tired. But purpose isn't powered by your mood. It's powered by God's intention for your life. Even when you are worn out, even when your hands feel weak, even when you have nothing but a whisper of hope left in you, the purpose God assigned to you keeps unfolding beneath the surface. Fatigue doesn't cancel calling. It just makes you more aware of the weight of what you're carrying. There are moments in your life when you think you're stalling, when you assume everything has come to a halt because you don't have the strength to push like you used to. But what you fail to see is that purpose has layers. Some layers are loud, visible, and energetic. Those are the seasons where everything feels aligned and everything feels possible. But other layers are quiet, slow, and deeply internal. Those are the moments when purpose is working beneath the soil of your spirit, preparing something that can only be developed in stillness or struggle. Fatigue doesn't stop this process. In fact, it often accelerates the transformation happening within you because tired seasons force you into a level of honesty with yourself that energetic seasons rarely require. Purpose is not dependent on your pace. You might feel like you're moving slowly, like you're barely making progress, like you're dragging your feet through a season that feels heavier than any you've ever known. But slow progress is still progress. A wary walk is still movement. And sometimes your purpose moves the most when your strength moves the least, because it is in those moments that your faith begins to take the lead. When you can't run on adrenaline or ambition anymore, you learn to move on trust. You learn to take steps not because you feel powerful, but because you believe God is still guiding you. There are people who assume that fatigue means they failed somewhere along the line. They believe that if they were truly aligned with purpose, they would feel constant clarity, consistent energy, unwavering confidence. But purpose is not the absence of fatigue. It is the presence of divine assignment in spite of fatigue. Being tired doesn't mean you've taken a wrong turn. It may mean you're actually in the heart of your calling. Purpose stretches you in ways comfort never will. It pushes you beyond your familiar limits, presses you into new territory, and asks you to grow in ways you never asked for. That stretching is tiring, but it is also shaping. When you look at people who are walking boldly in their calling, you're often seeing them in their highlight moments, not in the quiet battles, not in the nights they questioned everything, not in the mornings they had to drag themselves out of bed and remind themselves why they started. Purpose has always required endurance, and endurance is born in tired seasons. Even Jesus, carrying out the greatest purpose in history, experienced exhaustion. He withdrew to pray. He rested. He slept in storms. That wasn't weakness. It was a demonstration that divine assignment and human fatigue can coexist without diminishing each other. Sometimes the very reason you feel tired is because you've grown too big for your old environment. Purpose is pulling you into spaces you're not fully adjusted to yet, and that transition creates friction. You're not failing, you're evolving. You're stepping into new demands, new responsibilities, new expectations, new spiritual territory. Growth takes energy. Expansion drains you before it strengthens you. And in that exhaustion, purpose is widening your capacity, teaching you resilience, and strengthening your spiritual muscles. There are seasons when purpose feels invisible because the work being done is internal. You're unlearning old patterns. You're healing wounds you didn't even realize were slowing you down. You're letting go of identities that no longer serve the version of you God is calling forth. That kind of inner work is exhausting because it demands honesty, self-examination, and courage. But just because you can't see the visible fruit yet doesn't mean purpose isn't advancing. Purpose is a process, not an event, and tired seasons often hold some of the most important steps in that process. You might think that because you feel drained, you're no longer effective, but sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is show up when you're tired and let God do what your strength cannot. There is a unique kind of grace that shows up when you have nothing left to prove. When you're tired, you stop pretending, you stop relying on your own abilities, you begin to rely on God in a deeper, more authentic way. That is where purpose becomes less about performance and more about obedience. Purpose doesn't require perfection, it requires willingness, even if that willingness comes from a worn out place. There is a quiet kind of purpose that grows in fatigue. The purpose of endurance. Every time you choose not to quit, you're strengthening something inside you that will be necessary for future seasons. Every time you push through one more day, one more step, one more prayer, one more act of faith, you're building resilience, you're developing the stamina to carry the next level of your calling. Purpose doesn't only advance through victories, it advances through persistence. And persistence is often born in exhaustion. It's important to understand that fatigue can be a tool, not just a struggle. It reveals where you need support, where you need boundaries, where you need rest, where you need healing. Purpose doesn't require you to ignore your limits. It requires you to recognize them so that God can strengthen, guide, and sustain you in the ways only He can. Your tiredness becomes a teacher, not a threat. It teaches you to delegate, to trust, to pace yourself, to pray differently, to depend differently, even when you feel like you're standing still. Purpose is aligning connections, opening doors, preparing opportunities, preparing you. Fatigue cannot stop what God set in motion. It can slow you down enough to make you more aware, more intentional, more grounded. You may feel like everything is on pause. Behind the scenes, something is shifting, something is building, something is moving that you may not fully understand yet. God wastes nothing, not your tears, not your questions, not your exhaustion. Purpose weaves all of it together into becoming the person you were created to be, even in moments when you feel like you have nothing left to offer. This moment is a pause, not the end of your story. There are seasons in life when everything feels like it's shutting down around you, when progress feels impossible, when prayers seem unanswered, and when your spirit feels quieter than it has ever been. In those moments, it's easy to assume that something has gone terribly wrong. It's easy to believe that you've reached the limit of what your life can become, that the doors you hoped would open have closed for good, that the pathway ahead has vanished. But what you're experiencing is not a finale, it's a stillness. It's a holy pause, a breath in the middle of a chapter, a moment where God is holding you in place not to punish you, but to prepare you. A pause is not a period, it's a comma, a transition point between what was and what will be. Life has rhythms. Not all of those rhythms are loud. Not all of them are fast. Not all of them are exciting. Some rhythms are slow, quiet, and internal. These are the rhythms of reflection, healing, pruning, and rebuilding. When God pauses your life, He is not stopping your purpose. He is strengthening your foundation. He is giving you the space to recalibrate, to breathe, to reconsider where you're going and why. A pause offers clarity that motion often steals. It invites you to see what you've overlooked, to hear what you've been too busy to notice, and to feel what you've been too distracted to process. We often panic in the pause because we equate movement with meaning. We assume that if we're not advancing visibly, then we're losing ground. But there are many forms of forward motion, and not all of them look like progress from the outside. Sometimes the deepest growth happens underground, like roots sinking into soil before a seed ever breaks through the surface. Those roots are hidden, but they are essential. Without them, the plant cannot stand, cannot last, cannot carry fruit. God sometimes leads you into a season where your roots need strengthening, where your spirit must anchor itself more deeply in faith, identity, and truth. That anchoring requires stillness. It requires a pause. A pause can also be a place of protection. You might feel like something has been delayed, but God may be shielding you from something you can't yet see. He may be blocking you from walking into a situation that isn't prepared for you, or a door that would have caused more harm than help. What you perceive as stagnation may be divine preservation. Sometimes God slows you down to keep your heart safe, to redirect your steps away from danger, to position you for something better than what you were planning to settle for. If only you could see the full picture, you would understand that the pause is not the sign of abandonment, it's the sign of intentional care. Human beings have a tendency to interpret silence as rejection. When things go quiet, when opportunities slow down, when people shift, when routines break, the mind begins to invent stories about failure and finality. But silence is not synonymous with ending. It's often the environment where transformation takes place. Consider how a caterpillar enters a cocoon. From the outside, it looks like inactivity, like nothing is happening. But inside, an entire metamorphosis is unfolding. The pause is not empty, it's full of unseen activity. Your pause might feel like stillness, but spiritually, emotionally, mentally, there's movement happening within you that you may not recognize until you step out of this season. The danger of mistaking a pause for an ending is that you might be tempted to quit right before the breakthrough. People often give up not because they lack potential, but because they misunderstand timing. You might be standing in the most crucial stretch of your journey, the part where the story feels slow, heavy, or uncertain, but it is setting the stage for the moment when everything shifts. Every great story has a point where the tension rises, where the struggle heightens, where the outcome feels unclear. That moment is never the end, it is the turning point, and God writes your life with those same arcs. What feels like a downturn is often the setup for a divine plot twist. Pauses teach you to listen differently. When the noise of your life quiets down, when distractions fall away, when your usual patterns are interrupted, you hear God's voice with a new sharpness. You start discerning what truly matters. You start recognizing what you've been carrying that no longer needs to come with you. You start noticing desires that were buried beneath business. The pause becomes a classroom where God teaches you lessons you could not learn while running. Even if the pause feels uncomfortable, it may be delivering wisdom that will shape how you step into the next season. You may also find that during the pause, people shift. Some move closer, some drift away, some reveal their true intentions. Some show you support you never expected. The pause exposes the quality of your connections. When your life slows down, you see who remains, who cares, who listens, who invests. It becomes clear which relationships were seasonal and which relationships are part of your story long term. This clarity is a gift, even if it arrives wrapped in discomfort. Pauses also allow you to gather strength. You've been fighting battles, carrying responsibilities, holding up expectations, and pouring out energy for a long time. Your mind, your body, your spirit, they all have limits. Rest is not a weakness, it is a requirement. You cannot run on empty and expect to fulfill a purpose that demands fullness. A pause gives your soul a chance to replenish what life has drained. It gives you permission to rest without guilt, to breathe without urgency, to stabilize without pressure. Even champions pause, even warriors pause, because without pauses, endurance breaks. A pause can reveal buried emotions you've pushed aside. Maybe you've been hurt and never dealt with it. Maybe you've been disappointed but kept moving. Maybe you've been grieving silently. In the stillness, those emotions rise to the surface, not to overwhelm you, but to heal you. Healing often requires stillness. Wounds don't close when you keep scraping against life. They heal when you stop long enough for God to tend to them. The pause creates space for that kind of tending. Sometimes a pause realigns you with what you truly desire. You may have been chasing goals that were never yours to begin with, trying to meet expectations that didn't match your identity, pursuing paths that brought more anxiety than joy. In the stillness, you discover what your heart actually longs for. Purpose becomes clearer, passion becomes clearer. A pause recalibrates your internal compass. And there are times when a pause is simply preparation. What's ahead of you may require more strength, more wisdom, more discipline, more faith than what you currently possess. God doesn't rush you into rooms you're not ready to occupy. He prepares you, He equips you, He matures you. And that preparation doesn't always happen in motion. Preparation is often quiet, subtle, internal. You might feel like you're waiting, but heaven is working. In the grand narrative of your life, this moment is just a page, not the final chapter. The story is still being written, the plot is still unfolding, and the author has not put down his pen.